Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. Let's talk the grand scope of the Big 12 and who already looks good for 2025. Texas Tech lands the number one portal class in the country. Posted a graphic about it yesterday. We know Arizona State brings a lot back. Iowa State brings a lot back. Colorado still got Deion Sanders. Baylor brings a lot back. There are a slew of teams in that 7 to 8 range from this past season that all look deadly. Who would BYU be most worried about in 2025?
It's a really good question, and funny you should bring this topic up, Drake. I had Chris Level. We did a crossover ahead of the BYU basketball game, and we talked about this very topic, and I think I came down to it during that conversation. The team I'm most worried about is I'm looking at Kansas State, and I know that sounds crazy, but think of what Chris Kleiman has done. He just really kind of operates, kind of flies under the radar, but has sneaky good pickups, and obviously the developmental program of what Kansas State does, bringing their guys up through the ranks via high school and JUCOs, like they do a really, really good job. I've got a sneaking suspicion that Kansas State's ultra motivated. They had a really bad back half of the season here in 2024. I think they got a lot of motivation to get it right in 2025. So speaking from the BYU perspective, I'm worried about K-State. And the other team I am keeping an eye on, I am wary of Texas Tech. They have thrown a lot of money around in the NIL sphere. And yeah, I would believe that they would substantiate themselves as maybe the number one portal class. And that should be an interesting thing because as Chris Level talked about, the whole thing with what they've done with Joey McGuire is they've tried to go the high school route and develop guys, and now they're kind of pushing the chips in on the transfer portal, trying to jumpstart things here. So very interesting times down there in Lubbock. We'll see where it all goes.
Is there a worry for BYU fans? I want to talk about a couple of different Big 12 teams over the course of this segment. Is there a worry for BYU fans only bringing in 7 transfer portal commits? Currently 24/7 has BYU as 15th in the Big 12.
There was some concern because BYU got a very slow start in the portal, Drake. I think you were paying attention to it as well. They just did not get anybody for the first 2 weeks of the portal season. And trust me, I was hearing howling from all corners of Cougar Nation about they're not doing anything. Jake, what's going on? The other side of it is BYU brings a lot of pieces back. Think about it. They bring their quarterback, their entire running back core is coming back. We'll have to see on the junior college side of things with guys like Darius Lassiter, Caleb Etienne, as well as a guy like Maury Bamba. If they get all those guys back, BYU's pretty well stocked. And quite frankly, with that, they don't have a lot of spots, especially with the roster cuts downs that are going to be coming to college football at the FBS level. So I look at it. I think BYU, by my math, Drake, had maybe 10 to 11 spots to add transfer portal guys. So currently sitting at 7 to 8 guys, they only got a few more spots. So I think if you consider the circumstances, BYU's done what they were expected to do.
Colorado is right back up there at the top, and they were sitting with BYU in the first week, 10 days of the transfer portal, both schools with only 1 or 2 commitments. And I wondered if the Buffs, who brought in 40-plus players last year, had lost their touch in the portal. Now, they bring a lot back themselves. What they really needed was a quarterback that got that in Caden Salter and finished with the second back. I say finished. There are still some – you can still move and shake here. We'll see the spring transfer portal class as well. But they're second in the Big 12 per 24/7. Is Colorado's Deion Sanders proving that the transfer portal can be a plug and play to win football games?
Well, if you look at the record from this past season, I think he proved that very point. And I think the bigger thing is that Deion is a guy who believes that he can kind of mix and match. He believes he's like the ultimate motivator. Give him whoever he wants, he'll get him into the program, and he'll mold them into the best version of themselves. I think that's what he sincerely believes about this program. And I can't argue with the results from this past year. Now, BYU did wipe the floor with the Buffs in that bowl game, and that was a really impressive performance for BYU. But beyond that, Colorado had a really, really fine season. A Heisman Trophy winner on that roster, Drake. So I don't think you can argue with the results. And if Deion, once again, I think the case study will be this year. If he can turn it over, you mentioned Caden Salter, maybe Juju Lewis ends up taking that quarterback job away from him at some point next year. If Colorado proves they can continue to kind of just turn this roster over every single year and have success, you'll see more and more programs start to buy into the Deion Sanders philosophy.
The Utah Utes. They are 5th in the Big 12 in the transfer portal, again, per 24/7. Landed a big 4-star commit as well. And the goal is to reload. They lost a lot of guys, including 2 of the BYU Cougars. Is Utah a scary team? Not just for the Big 12 next year, but for BYU, knowing, and we'll get deeper into this, but knowing the rivalry, are they a scary team for the Cougs?
There's always a concern because these are, like I said, they're arch rivals for a reason. They like to get after one another. The thing about it is, BYU learned their lesson via the portal year one in the Big 12, Drake. They turned their roster over. More than half of the guys on that 23 roster were newcomers, and BYU never really gelled that season and struggled on the way to a 5-7 record. I'm not going to lie. I look at what Utah's got going on, all the bodies they're bringing in, particularly on offense. Jason Beck, as a new offensive coordinator, has got a lot of work to do to get all those guys on the same page. He is a former BYU quarterback. He's done a lot of good things at multiple levels of football. This may be his biggest challenge to date. I'm interested to see how it goes, but I have massive concerns that they may have similar struggles to like BYU did in 2023.
I am overjoyed. I think we can confidently say, to me at least, that the Big 12 has won the transfer portal because the bottom 4 teams in this conference, you have to have 4 teams at the bottom, by the way. You can't, that's how rankings go. Kansas State, Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State. What they all have in common is they won last year and they bring a lot back. Positive attrition. Those schools will have 6 to 10 guys leave, probably for the better for everybody involved, and they don't need to bring in a whole slew of guys to compete next year because they're growing products both from the portal from a year or two ago and from the high school ranks. What I do like to see, when I do think should scare the rest of the Big 12, is Baylor at 8th in the conference, 11 commits, 3, 4, 5 of those being plug and play guys, or Jake, plug and compete guys. Yeah. That maybe the best part of the transfer portal is putting some pressure under a guy who's been there for 2 years to pony up and play better or lose their spot in the starting lineup. Seeing Baylor at 8, and I'm about as cynical as they come about Baylor football, do you feel as though the Bears are a sneaky Big 12 championship pick next year?
I do consider them to be a sneaky pick. Here's the deal. Dave Aranda's been under a lot of pressure, and you and I have talked about this both on and offline a lot about the pressure he's been under. They responded very well last year. Sawyer Robertson was a major surprise overall. He had, I think his big coming out party, frankly, was against BYU, and kind of picked up from there and rolled the rest of the way. If they can get good quarterback play, Baylor can make it a nice run here. I like what you said, though. Plug and compete. BYU had a former Baylor Bear in their own right, and Gary Bohannon come in and really push Jake Retzloff, and it made Jake Retzloff a better version of himself, and obviously helped BYU propel themselves to 11-2 this past year. That's a major thing. You need to have guys who feel like they're being pushed so they can become the best version of themselves. BYU followed a similar philosophy, I think, with a lot of guys they added via the portal. Now, I think a few more of them are probably plug and play because they're probably coming in to start. Guys like Andrew Gentry, where BYU has a dearth of talent at tackle, offensive tackle, I should say. He probably gets to start right away, but you need to have guys come in and push other guys on the roster because complacency can set in, and that will absolutely cripple a program like a Baylor or a BYU.
Yeah, I would say for Cincinnati in that 12 range and Houston in the 9, they're in different spots to me, but Cincinnati being at 12th in the Big 12 is not a good sign. I didn't have a lot of confidence in Scott Satterfield coming into this season. The fall apart there at the end wasn't very positive for the Bearcats, and them being in that 12 spot. I'm looking for that to be overhauled. I want Cincinnati to perform the way that UCF or Kansas did in the transfer portal this offseason to rebuild a roster that needs a lot of new pieces. They didn't do that. I would say that, as we've talked about competitors, Cincinnati would be that one team that I really circle as probably not great. Do it, Jay. Come on. Talk that talk.
Let me just interject this. Cincinnati may have had the quietest and least impactful transfer portal season that I can recall across the Big 12. And that's not a good sign if you're a Bearcats fan, because I'm with you. I wasn't all that high on Scott Satterfield going to Cincinnati. I don't think it's been what they expected. And he's probably on borrowed time if he doesn't really course correct very quickly.
Well, they're a year away from pulling a UCF or West Virginia and rehiring Luke Fickell. Bring him back. Coming up, the rivalry with Utah and BYU. Has it gone? It's the best in the Big 12. I think we can all agree on that. Has it gone too far? This is a Locked On Big 12. Locked On Cougars crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.